if you follow the daily actions as I've listed them out in this guide, you will book calls. So logically, you need to prepare for that outcome. You need to prepare for what is going to happen when I book a call. Here's the structure of an automation agency sale. I follow an extremely simple process for all of my deals, and this process is 3 parts. First, a discovery call. Discovery call is just where you get to know the customer, where you get to sell them on you and why you should work together, and then ultimately make the determination of whether you should move forward or not. The second step is a proposal. Now, I will send a blended proposal agreement invoice. This is important, and I'll touch on this in future days. The third is if a prospect doesn't sign by a certain number of days later, I will follow up automatically. I'll basically subscribe them to an infinite proposal follow-up sequence, and then assuming that they don't want to work with me, they could just tell me as opposed to just, ignore my messages or that sort of thing. I've attached a much more detailed version of this in this whimsical, and today we're going to be focusing on the first part, which is the discovery call. This is the whimsical that I was referring to, and you'll find it just by clicking the link. There are basically 3 prevailing systems now in automation agencies, and really just agencies in general. The first is the one call close system, where here are all of your leads coming in. PPC, SEO, social media, referrals, communities, all of them come into a meeting booked stage. Now, if you book the meeting and they show, you have a sales meeting, which is called a discovery meeting. On that sales meeting, you push for their credit card information right there on the call. Then assuming that they sign and pay on the call, then you start the project. This is the most aggressive of all of the closed systems, and I find it's typically not the best fit for automation because automation often involves some scoping steps. You sort of need to make sure that you can actually do the customer project. So I don't personally like doing the one call close system. It's just too much pressure, requires a lot of skill on behalf of the salesperson to push that hard. And it also just requires you to really back your shit up. The easier system, the one that I like to personally use, is the traditional agency sales system, where we have all of our inbound right over here. And then this goes into a meeting booked scenario. This meeting booked, same thing as before. If they show up, we'll do a sales meeting. And then if they want to move forward, we actually don't close them on the call. What we'll do is we'll add another step where we send the detailed proposal or scope of work. Right? This is the system, as you can see, that I was just describing. Then we will do follow-ups infinitely until they sign. And then once they sign, we actually start the project. So this is my system. This is the one that I personally prefer to use, and it's the one that I recommend for most beginners, people that haven't built established businesses yet, or they just don't really know what they're doing on the automation side of things, because it's a lot simpler. There's also sort of at the other end of the system, there's also sort of at the other end of the scale, a much more drawn out sales process, which is a little more enterprise and involves more calls. And I don't personally use this system because I think it's just too much work. It doesn't really make sense for us. In this system, we have like 2 different calls. We have a discovery call, then we have a scoping step, then we have a closing call. Then on the closing call, we'll send a proposal. After the closing call, then we'll send a proposal, and then assuming that they want to work together, then we'll start. This might work if your project is, let's say, $150,000. You're going to need more calls, obviously, to verify that you guys are a good fit. Usually see it's a lot longer. But this 2-call close system, I personally don't really like. So I focus on the traditional agency sales system. And the traditional agency sales system starts with this discovery call. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, the discovery call is also termed the disco call, demo call, intro call, etc. The idea of the discovery call is the same regardless. You are just looking to get to know the prospect. You're looking to get to know their needs and just see if you can help. In my opinion, it's the most important part of the sales process because it's where the customer forms how they feel about you. And what they say, first impressions are paramount, right? The issue is, main question I get, what the hell do I say on the sales call? What do I say on the disco? Now, I personally don't recommend that you try and memorize a script. I believe in the importance of authenticity. I believe in the importance of definitely not reading what I'm saying off of a school curriculum page. However, there are some key points to hit during a discovery call, and these points will help you guide your conversation, get you the information that you need, and really just ensure that the sales flow is proceeding logically and intelligently. So instead of calling it a script, I call it a sales skeleton. And this is personally what I recommend that you guys do. What we're going to do is we're actually going to memorize this sales skeleton over the course of the next few minutes using a simple mnemonic. And then you'll be able to use this not only for automation agencies, but just any sort of sales system you ever do again. So here's the automation agency sales skeleton. The first step is build rapport. Rapport just refers to a relationship, a friendship, some type of positive feeling. It's simple but important. My goal is always to make them smile at least once. What I usually do is I'll first say hi, I'll do some jokes, I'll do some introductions. I'll typically ask them, where are you from? Where are you calling me out of? That sort of deal. When they ask me where I'm from, I'll say Canada, Great White North or something like that. And that is usually enough to get a chuckle, believe it or not. Once they laugh and are warmed up, I will usually transition out with something like, okay, you ready to jump in? They'll say yes, and then we will proceed to the next step. The next step is set the schedule. I will almost always frame a call with something like, hey, here's how these calls usually go. First, I want to learn why you reached out to me or why you responded to my email. I know that the average business receives like 24 of those a day. So there's a reason you have to call, and I wanted to know why. Then once we talk about that, I'd like to get some background into your business. I'd like to chat maybe some numbers, average deal sizes, that sort of thing. Then if you have questions, I can clarify them. That'll take maybe 5-10 minutes. Then assuming that that works, I can tell you how I would help you, exactly what sort of system we'd build together, exactly what sort of solution that we'd implement. Does that sound good? They say yes, and then we continue. Why me? Why now? Why this? What you'll notice is I'm basically clarifying if that sounds good at the end of every stage. And this is like a mainstay of just any sort of sales, call that you have. You just want to verify like, hey, does that sound good? Hey, are we on board? All right, cool. Does that check out? At every point along the way, you want them to say yes, 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 yes. You basically want to make them feel like they're in the driver's seat controlling your interaction, even though you are. Anyway, once you're done that stage, you say, why did you decide to book? I know that you didn't have to, so what compelled you? Then they explain. Then you say, all right, what would you say your goals are with the system? Then they explain. All right, have you tried anything else to get to this? Have you tried anything else to solve this problem before you contacted me? Oh, you used to work with somebody else? All right, well, tell me about that. And then the last thing is, and why are we doing this now? Like, why didn't you do this, I don't know, a couple months ago? Oh, okay, right. After they tell you all of these, I'll usually press on some pain points during our call. Like I'll ask about the customer journey. So if I'm unclear on how they get their customers, I'll say something along the lines of, tell me about like, what's the first point that the customer will talk to you guys or see you guys? Is it on your ads or is it like the call? Oh, do they typically look at your website first or, okay. After that, who do they talk to? Oh, interesting. Now, when they're ready to start working with your recruitment company or something like that, do you guys have a kickoff call? Oh, all right. And what do you do after your deal's done? Like, what do you do after the fulfillment? Basically, the goal is you just want to get an idea of the customer journey from the first touch point to the last touch point. This ends up being really important because most businesses aren't very clear on this themselves. Another good question to ask is, what is your revenue per employee? So nice. How many staff members do you have? You said 25. Okay. And what did you guys pull in last year? Like 200K, 300K, 500K? Sorry, actually, that'd be really low. A million, 2 million. From there, you can really quickly calculate the revenue per employee. The benefit there is if they have 25 people and they make $1 million a year, then you know that on average, every employee is being paid $4,000. You know how much the value of an employee is to the business. So when you come in to pitch your own services, you sort of have that, and it helps you price. It's very important. Another one is the sales history. How used to growth are they? So nice. Have you guys been growing a lot? Oh, wow. You doubled your revenue in the last 3 months. That's crazy. Okay, great. Now you know the sort of velocity that they're pushing for. You know how quickly they're looking to grow. And typically people that are looking to grow quickly are willing to spend money on things that they find important. So all of this is basically just, hey, how much money should I charge them? How qualified is my buyer? From there, you move on to the solution stage, where I typically just say, all right, sweet. Listen, I think I have enough to propose a solution here. Just before that, do you have any other questions for me? No? Okay, perfect. And then what I do is I will pull from my library of solutions, because I typically have a bunch of templates that I've created in advance. And then I will use one of those solutions or multiple of those solutions to try and solve the problem. I will very rarely come up with a new solution, although I do not recommend coming up with a new solution. The point of using templates or blueprints or created systems is so that past you could have done all the work. Like you don't want to have to rebuild the wheel from scratch every time. I'd much rather just leverage the work that past me has done, so I just don't have to worry about it anymore. I know that my projects can be 80% of the way. Typically, while I'm pitching the solution, I'll always ask stuff like, yeah, does that make sense? How do you feel about that? Okay, great. Does that sound like what you were looking for? I'll just repeat these little temperature checks every so often just to ensure that this person is actually on board. If you don't do that, you can find that you've just been talking the entire sales call for 25 minutes and the customer just checked out after the first 5. So you just don't want a situation like that. You just want to make sure you're constantly asking the customer for feedback and seeing how well this aligns with what they were looking for. After that, I do a proposal. Now, I will rarely ever close in the call. So what I do is I take a step back. I double check that the project scope isn't going to be a royal pain in my ass. And then I send them a proposal afterwards. You can, of course, send them a proposal on the call for sure. You know, you can like whip it up and type out answers to the questions that they're asking while they're telling you them and be like, okay, here's your proposal. But I find that typically I respect the customer more and the customer respects me more if I just give them a little bit of space to breathe. And then I respect myself more because I'll know that the job that I'm doing, I'm not just doing to like win a quick buck. It's actually something that I can fulfill and it's a little bit more scalable. So usually they'll be like, so how much money is this going to cost? And I'll say, it's hard for me to price exactly. I do want to scope this out first, make sure that, I firmly understand all the software platforms you're working with. I'm going to run through all their APIs. I'm going to build out a whole project scope for you first. Once I have that, I'll write your proposal and send it immediately. I have a feeling it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to maybe $6,000. I don't really know. The range is just that open question. So, I can write you a proposal. I'll send it within a couple of hours. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, great. You're going to have the whole team hunched around your shoulder looking at it. Okay, sweet. I'm going to make sure it's good then. And then we get to the objection handling part. I usually don't deal with objections in my sales skeleton. So if an objection comes up, I will say something along the lines of, all right, hey, I completely understand. Why don't I send you a proposal? That way you'll be able to take a step back from this. We're not going to be on a call. It's not really going to be heated. And I'm not going to ask you to make a decision right now. When you're in, as clear a state of mind as humanly possible, you can make your decision. And then if it works for you, awesome, we'll set up a kickoff. If not, then no hard feelings whatsoever. Fair? They'll usually say yes, and then we'll sort of take it from there. So I personally don't do the objection handling thing. Some people would disagree with me, and you're free to do it if you have a sales background, but I don't. All right, so something that I want to touch on just before we end today is that it's not about the system. Like, this sales skeleton works. Hundreds of people have used it now, and they've used it to great success. They've closed tons of deals. They've changed their family's financial situation. Fucking awesome, right? But it's not perfect. What I've come to realize is that consistently selling and selling well is less about having a specific system, and it's more just about having a system, something that you repeat and come back to, the same flow that you use for a dozen calls or more. Because if you do that, you will inevitably become an expert at it, and that will make you much more confident on the call, and it's going to end up being your confidence and your perceived authority and competence that wins you the deal, more so than a specific structure. Of course, structures work, and there's structures that are better than other structures, but the point I'm making is that the most important thing is just to have a system. Now, if you don't have a system at all, you should certainly use mine. Just understand why it works. These gurus out there will try and tell you that there's only one road to success, one super amazing sales script that just wins all these deals. But in reality, that's not it. It's usually just the vibe that you bring to a sales call. All right, so how would I actually memorize the sales skeleton? Here's a super simple and easy way. I just listed out all the steps here: build rapport, set the schedule, why now, solution, proposal. And I just use a simple acronym, BS-WISP. BS-WISP. When I just say BS-WISP back to myself 3 or 4 times, close my eyes, I open them again, I look at the thing, I typically know what all of these letters mean. B stands for building rapport, S stands for setting the schedule, W stands for why now, S stands for solution, P stands for proposal, the little I is a throwaway just to make the word work. And just repeat this back to yourself 3 or 4 times, go for a little walk, and then try and remember what all of the letters stand for. If you know that you first build rapport, then you set the schedule, then you answer the why now question, then you talk about the solution, and then finally you do a proposal. Every sales call from now is just going to get easier and easier and easier. You'll be able to do them without even necessarily looking at that skeleton that we had before. And the more adept you get, the more you can memorize the specific things that you're going to say. But literally just starting with a structure is the 80-20 here, and just having that BS-WISP at the back of your mind when you're on a call will get you most of the way there. I've attached the sales skeleton document over here as a standalone. The reason why I've done this is so that if at any point in time you wanted to, train somebody on how to do this, or copy this and print this out, put this in front of you, you can. Just feel free to make a copy of the document and we'll take it from there. Now get out there and crush it. Best of luck.